Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham, Recha Kudash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of 2 Kings, the 16th chapter. And here we see the we hear a bit about Ahaz, right? As at the end of the previous chapter, it mentioned Ahaz coming into power, and I believe, who was it that was his father, right? Uzziah, or Jotham, actually. Yeah, Uzziah was his grandfather. So this is 2 Kings chapter 16, verse 1. Ahaz reigns over Judah. Now this is the same Ahaz that is there at the time of, or the prophet there at the time being Isaiah. And in the book of Isaiah, he is referenced there as well. All right, so that's the same time period here. In the 17th year of Pekah, the son of Remaliah, Ahaz, the son of Jotham, king of Judah, began to reign. 20 years old was Ahaz when he began to reign, and reigned 16 years in Jerusalem, and did not that which was right in the sight of the Lord Yahweh his God, like David his father. So Ahab went off, and you'll see what he did. But he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel. And what did the kings of Israel do primarily? Right? A lot of idolatry, a lot of heathenistic pagan worship, right? They did that, and it seems here Ahaz followed suit. Yea, and he made his son to pass through the fire. Now, when you hear about that term, to pass through the fire, what it means is an actual sacrifice, all right? A fire sacrifice, where they would burn their children, okay? Predominantly unto, at least, the deity known as Molech, right? Just an idol anyway, or demon. But that name Molech is just one of many names that it is known by. According to the abominations of the heathen, whom the Lord Yahweh cast out from before the children of Israel. And this was one of the primary reasons why the Lord forewarned Israel and told them to, or commanded them to destroy all the heathen out of the land, to avoid these kinds of situations. And he sacrificed and burnt incense in the high places and on the hills and under every green tree, right? So those on the different shrines, and basically the way the Northern Kingdom were doing it, right? They would set up these groves, which is really just like a certain gathering of trees under there, and they would perform different offerings and sacrifices onto pagan gods, idols, and so on. Then Rezin, king of Syria, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, came up to Jerusalem to war, and they besieged Ahaz, but could not overcome him. So the king of the Northern Kingdom and the king of Syria joined forces to come against Ahaz. At that time, Rezin, king of Syria, recovered Elath to Syria, and drave the Jews from Elath, and the Syrians came to Elath and dwelt there on to this day. Now, for verse 6, this is actually an important point, or an important reason as to why it's good to know and understand, or even go back into the Hebrew to make this verse clear. So first thing I'll do is let's find out where is Elath, right? So I looked it up here, and the approximate location of Elath here is right here. Okay, I believe this is the Sinai Peninsula. You have the Red Sea, and then you have right here on this coastal area, you have Elath. Now, if you go north a little bit, right, you see Jerusalem over here. This around here was the region or the territory of the Edomites. Okay, they were southeast-ish of Judah. All right, so you had the region, the Edomites were over here. The Syrians, right, were, well, maybe I might still be able to use this map, but if you go more up north, the Syrians were all the way at the top, where Damascus was, or Aram, Aramea. That's where they were. And it doesn't make sense that the Syrians, being all the way up north in Damascus, that area, Hamath and so on, would come all the way down here, right? Come and take this territory from Israel, right? Approximating this is the region. And then they would come all the way down from up there to come and dwell over here. That doesn't make sense. And the reason it doesn't make sense is because when you actually go into the Hebrew here, you'll find out this word in particular, translated as Syrians, is actually, or should be translated as Edomites. So the verse really should read that at that time, Rezin, king of Syria, recovered Elath to Syria and drave the Jews from Elath. So he took that, he basically took that away from Israel. So we didn't have the jurisdiction over there anymore. And after that was done, the Syrians, or in this case, the Edomites, came to Elath and dwelt there, because literally they're right there. They're right up here, and this is right next to them. And so when you go into the Hebrew, all right, you'll see here, right, at that time, Rezin, king of Syria, the Hebrew word there is Aram, right, which is the Syrians, right? They come from the man Aram. So Arameans are the Syrians. So the king of Syria, Aram, Malak Aram, recovered Elath to Syria. You have there Aram again, or La Aram, to Syria, and drave the Jews from Elath and the Syrians. Now the word here is not Aram, all right, or Aramea, or none of that. It's Ada. Here they have it as Adam Yah, right? But they're trying to, let's go into the word. The patronymic form, meaning the original form here, they have as Adam or Adama, which really should be Adawam, which is Edom. Okay, there you go. Edom, red, Edomite, Idumean. Okay, so that is the actual word over there. So here you have the word Idam Yah, which is they're trying to say the plural of Edom, which would be Edomites. Okay, and so which really should be Adawam Yum, right? Or something along those lines. But anyway, the word there is Edomite. And you can see here, it's translated 11 times. This word shows up 11 times as Edomites and once as Syria. Okay. And see if it shows it here. Yeah. So it's the same word that's used in Deuteronomy 23. And I think in there, even in there, right, we've done lessons on it going into the clerical era there. So it's I think in Deuteronomy it really should be Syrian. But anyway, there's lessons on that if you want to understand more about that. But you can see here, right, Doeg the Edomite, Edomite, Ammonites, Edomites. It's the same word here. Okay. Yep, and the only time here that that word is translated as Syria is 2 Kings 16:6, which is supposed to be here, at least for this word, is supposed to be Edomites. Okay, so the point here being, when you go into the Hebrew, what it really will read is that at that time, Rezin, the king of Syria, or Aram, recovered Elath to Syria. So they took control over it, Aram, and drave the Jews from Elath, and the Edomites, okay, came to Elath and dwelt there on to this day. So basically it became a part of their territory. So Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, or Pileser, king of Assyria, right? Because he's now being besieged on both sides, right, by the king of Israel and the king of Syria, Rezin. So he sends messengers to the Assyrian king for help, saying, "I am thy servant and thy son. Come up and save me out of the hand of the king of Syria, and out of the hand of the king of Israel, which rise up against me." And remember, the Assyrians were a superpower within the region at this time, and they were growing more and more. And Ahaz took the silver and the gold that was found in the house of the Lord Yahweh, and in the treasures of the king's house, and sent it for a present to the king of Assyria. And the king of Assyria hearkened unto him, for the king of Assyria went up against Damascus and took it, and carried the people of it captive to Kir, and slew Rezin. And so now when you look up Rezin here in secular history, there's some information about him. And there's some, I guess you can say, extra biblical information here that backs up this point from the perspective of the Assyrians. Okay, so it says here, Rezin of Aram was the Aramean king ruling from Damascus during the 8th century BC. 8th century BC meaning during between the period of 99 to basically like 700. So within those 700, 749, 750, 780s, 720s, that's during the 8th century. So during his reign, he was tributary to King Tiglath-Pileser III of Assyria. Rezin conspired with a number of Levantine kings. These are the kings that were within the region of the Levant, right? Which we went over yesterday, but it's that region, that portion there, from right around here, really, right? That middle portion there. In any case, examples being Hiram II of Tyre to rebel against Tiglath-Pileser III. Rezin's reign ended in 732 BC when Tiglath-Pileser III sacked Damascus and annexed Aram. And now here's the context, right? In order to save his life, he, Rahianu, fled alone and entered the gate of his city like a mongoose. I impaled, and this is from the perspective of Tiglath-Pileser III. And by the way, the Assyrians were very brutal. You know, that's one detail to mention. They had some very brutal punishments. You know, and that was to put so much fear in their enemies to deter them if they became captives from acting stupid. I impaled his foremost men alive while making the people of his land watch. For 45 days I set up my camp around his city and confined him there like a bird in a cage. I cut down his plantations and orchards, which were without number. I did not leave a single one standing. I surrounded and captured the city Hadara, the ancestral home of Rahianu or Rezin of the land of Damascus, the place where he was born. I carried off 800 people with their possessions, their oxen, and their sheep and their goats. I carried off 750 captives from the cities of Carusa and Samaya, as well as 550 captives from the city of Metuna. Similar to what we read here about how when the king of Assyria came to Damascus, he took it and carried the people of it captive to Kir and slew Rezin, as we're reading here. Like tells after the deluge, I destroyed 591 cities of 16 districts of the land of Damascus. So I'll read this part real quick. It says Assyrian inscriptions indicate that Tiglath-Pileser made a 3-year campaign in the Levant from 734 to 732 BC. In the first year, he attacked the Phoenicians and sacked the coastal cities of Tyre and Sidon. In the second year, he devastated the land of Aram and the Arabs living in the Transjordan under Queen Shamsi. Although he beat the Arameans in the field, he failed to take Damascus. And so that's why, you know, Rezin was still able, right, and the Syrians were still able to be active up until this point. In the third year, he managed to take Damascus, where he slew King Rezin, as we read in the scriptures. He also destroyed and leveled the villages in northern Israel. He boasted of, and that's where you go into the time of Tobit, right? The deportation of the northern kingdom and the taking away of Israelites into the land of Assyria. He boasted of slaying King Pekah, and he installed Hoshea on the throne. Only the fortified capital of Samaria reigned, and the entire land was brought low. Archaeology confirms that many cities destroyed during this time this time period were never rebuilt. According to the Bible, the sack of Damascus was instigated by King Ahaz of Judah and ended in Rezin's execution. The execution of Rezin is neither confirmed nor disconfirmed by independent evidence, right? So, as is the case with anything historical, there's always one side that is, one side that's not. And the reason is because you have limited evidence, limited information to go off of, and so you make the best, at least based on archaeological proof. You deduce as much as you can, and then you infer, hey, maybe this is the conclusion. We don't need to do that because the scriptures tell us plainly, right? So we go with that, and we know, okay, this is what ended up happening, so on and so forth. And then they start going off, start tripping out. Isaiah 7:14 is dealing with the Messiah, not Hezekiah. So coming back to 2 Kings 16:9, verse 10 now. And King Ahaz went to Damascus. So at this point, Ahaz has called help from the Assyrian king. The Assyrian king came, took care of Damascus, quieted down Israel and basically helped Ahaz from the siege that he was under. And King Ahaz went to Damascus to meet Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria. And he saw an altar that was at Damascus, and the king Ahaz sent to Urijah the priest the fashion of the altar and the pattern of it, according to all the workmanship thereof. So he saw this altar, he's like, damn, this is nice, this design, oh, this is crazy. So immediately he sends the blueprints, so to speak, back to Urijah, saying, make this altar according to these blueprints, according to this design. And Urijah the priest built an altar according to all that King Ahaz had sent from Damascus. So Urijah the priest made it against King Ahaz, came from Damascus. And what that means is, it's worded that way, but what it means is he made it before King Ahaz arrived back from Damascus. And when the king was come from Damascus, the king saw the altar, and the king approached to the altar and offered thereon. So he saw it, he's all happy, and this looks so good, offer me, give me this. And so, he basically had an offering made for him, right, on the altar, and he burnt his burnt offering and his meat offering, and poured his drink offering, and sprinkled the blood of his peace offerings upon the altar. And this is being the new altar, right? Not the one that was built according to the blueprints the Lord gave to Moses, but this was the one that Ahaz saw from Damascus. It looked really nice to him, and he said, build this. And he brought also the brazen altar, which was before the Lord Yahweh. So this was the original altar, according to the design that the Lord wanted. He had them take that from the forefront of the house, from between the altar and the house of the Lord, and put it on the north side of the altar. So in other words, he had them move it from its original spot and move it somewhere else. And King Ahaz commanded Urijah the priest, saying, upon the great altar, burn the morning burnt offering and the evening offering, or the evening meat offering. Now remember, according to the law, right, there was a morning oblation and an evening oblation that the priest would constantly offer before the Lord, right? Ahaz says, don't do that on the old altar anymore. You do it now on the new one. And the king's burnt sacrifice and his meat offering with the burnt offering of all the people of the land, and their meat offering and their drink offerings, and sprinkle upon it the blood of the burnt offering and all the blood of the sacrifice, and the brazen altar shall be for me to inquire by. So when you're reading the law, right, you can go in there. It should be in the book of Leviticus, but it goes into the details of the different types of sacrifices, right? And when you would slay the animal, the blood would be, in one instance, right, the blood would be dipped on the horns of the altar and then poured on the side of the altar, right? And so he's saying all those things you do, no longer do it on the original altar, the brazen one. You're going to do it on this one here. That one, I'll think about what to do with it. And when you go into the word inquire, right, it's Bakar, which is ironically, right, my name. It's interesting because there are other, actually it's very interesting, right? So here you see in the Hebrew, let me actually pull this up here. the king's offering, and then you have the word, where are we? Inquire. Right, so you have two different words here that look very similar in spelling, right? You have here morning, right? Ba kwa, but I believe this in the morning is ba kwa ra, meaning the kwa and the ra are not joined. So it's spelled with the same three characters, but it's pronounced ba kwa ra. And then you have here ba kwa, right, which is the joining of the kwa and the ra, which changes the meaning here. So here you have to seek, inquire, consider, right, which would be the Bakwar of my name, right, Bakwar Math. And then you have the Bakwara, which here means morning, and so on, right? But going back to the point of the lesson here, when he says to inquire of, right, that would be for me to inquire of, the word there being to consider, right, to seek, to reflect. And in this case, when you're dealing with Ahab, right, usually when people go to inquire of the Lord, it's not at the altar, right? It's at, either the priest, the high priest with the Urim and the Thummim, or, one of the prophets or so on, not at the altar. So here, the word inquire makes most sense to be like, in the perspective of Ahaz, he's like, look, you for now, just do all the offerings, the sacrifices on this altar here. That one, I'll think about what to do with it later, right? Verse 16, thus did Urijah the priest according to all that King Ahaz commanded. And King Ahaz cut off the borders of the bases and removed the laver from off them, and took down the sea from off the brazen oxen that were under it, and put it upon a pavement of stones. Now, when you actually look up here, let me zoom out a bit. Look up King Solomon's temple, though, it's not really his temple, but he built it. Let's put it like that. Here we go. Here's a good example here. So when you take a look here, you see these here, this here, you have these, right? The lavers, they were basically to hold water. This was a very big one here. And it was built upon the back of these oxen here, right? I believe it was 3,333, if I remember the numbers, the blueprints correctly. When you go into the book of Ezekiel, right, when we went into that, getting towards the end, there is a visual that I played in there that sort of goes through the outline of the blueprints, but I think I covered this part in there too. Anyway, this had water, and so did these. Remember, you're dealing with sacrifices, you're dealing with blood and all that, so you need to be able to wash the meat, or the priests wash their hands, whatever the case is, you needed water. And that's what these were for. What Ahaz did was he had this removed from off the back of these oxen over here. Okay, when you go into 2 Kings 16 and 17, right? As it says, he cut off the borders of the bases and removed the laver from off them, and took down the sea. That's what it was called, right? It was referred to as the sea, but it was just like a giant pot, you could say, or a giant basin of water. It says here he removed the sea from off the brazen oxen that were under it, and put it upon a pavement of stones. Now, you would ask yourself, right, why would he do that? It doesn't say he replaced it with anything. So why take this off of the back of the oxen? What was the significance? What was the purpose of that? Now, something that actually just came to my mind was when we looked up in the previous lesson, Ben-Hadad, right? Or Ben-Hadad. It goes into, I believe it comes from, or actually not Ben-Hadad, it was Hadad, Syrian god or something like that. Yeah. So you had Hadad here, which was a Syrian, or as it says, a West Semitic or really Shemitic god. And I think it says it wasn't just of the Syrians. Let me see if I can find some more information here. Let's see. So it says here, Hadad was often depicted, there we go, as a bearded man with a horned headdress. But as you can see, it says here, the bull was his symbolic animal. Now, I'm trying to see where. Yeah, it says he was also known as Rimmon, Had, Hada, Hadu, so on and so forth, Baal-zephon, and by all these other names. Okay, I think I did click on here. And yeah, I can't remember exactly where I saw it, but I believe, right, going back to how it mentioned that he was a West Shemitic, where does it say? A West Shemitic god of storms and so on. Now remember that the Arameans come from Shem, right? If you do a quick search in here, and you look up Aram, you'll see here the children of Shem, Elam, Ashur, and Arphaxad and Lud and Aram. So if he was a West Shemitic god, then by extension, the Assyrians, which or Slaki, I said Aram, I was really referring to Ashur. The Assyrians, which come from Ashur, would to some degree also know about or maybe even honor him. So considering that, as we read up above here, the bull was a symbolic animal, possibly, this is just an inference here, but it's possible that Ahaz, having basically made himself subject to Tiglath-Pileser, which was an Assyrian, right? Ashur, they also probably held the bull to some degree, right? Some regard, just like the Egyptians. And so imagine maybe he comes here and you'll find out what else that Ahaz did for the benefit of the Assyrians. If he was to come here and to see something like this, possibly that might enrage him, or that might not put him in good standing with Ahaz, right? To see maybe a sacred animal or an animal that is a symbol of one of their deities or one of their gods being looked at as a servant, right? Or carrying this burden here, maybe it might not be such a good look for him. So that's just one possibility, right? An inference here of maybe why Ahaz had that basin taken off of the oxen. Anyway, it says here, and the covert for the Sabbath that they had built in the house, and the king's entry without, turned he from the house of the Lord for the king of Assyria. So he did this for the king of Assyria. And in other words, he altered, because it's difficult to picture how he turned it, because it doesn't give us too much details, and also we weren't there to see it. But we know that he altered this to some degree. And what this is when you go to the book of Ezekiel 46, in that vision that Ezekiel received of the temple, I'll read it real quick. It says, "Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, the gate of the inner court that looketh toward the east shall be shut 6 working days, but on the Sabbath it shall be opened. And in the day of the new moon it shall be opened. And the prince shall enter by the way of the porch of that gate without, and shall stand by the post of the gate. And the priest shall prepare his burnt offering and his peace offerings, and he shall worship at the threshold of the gate. Then he shall go forth, but the gate shall not be shut until evening." So there was basically, actually says, "Likewise the people of the land shall worship at the door of this gate before the Lord Yahweh in the Sabbaths and in the new moons." So there was this special gate and path that would only be opened on the Sabbath, right? And then close on that evening. And as we're reading here, right, it mentions here, right, the covert, which the covert here goes into like a roofing or a canopy, as it is mentioned. So verse 19, "Now the rest of the acts of Ahaz which he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And Ahaz slept with his fathers, and was buried with his fathers in the city of David, and Hezekiah his son reigned in his stead." And that brings us to the end of the book of 2 Kings 16. Lord willing, this is edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, B'rachah Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.